I don't know if you've had a spiritual experience in your life and what form that took and what influence it's had on you, and indeed whether you have decided to tell anybody about it. One thing that the Alistair Hardy Institute for Religious Experience found when it posed that question in national tabloids was that people wrote in, some of them were cranks, saying, when I've had 2 vodkas, I'm seeing angels everywhere. But there were those who were saying, who were professionals, lawyers, medics, teachers, and so on, who said, yes, I have had an experience which I've never told anybody about because I'm fearful of being labelled a crank, and my professional persona depends on my image and my reputation. But this is what happened to me. This week, I was in Burton having a cup of coffee with one of my colleagues. Some of you may know him, Ray Dexter, who is a lovely man and a mastermind finalist, would you believe? So I feel an even bigger intellectual pygmy when I'm with him. But he's head of chemistry, and we were talking about spiritual experiences. And he said, when I first started teaching in London, he said, you know how you rehearse experiments. And it was break time, and I was rehearsing an experiment that went horribly wrong. And suddenly, I was engulfed in the laboratory with all of this toxic gas smoke that was filling my lungs and filling the laboratory. And he said there was nobody around. Everybody was in the common room. And he said, I began to think irrationally, and I headed towards the one window which wouldn't open, and I wouldn't take no for an answer. I kept trying and trying to open this window for some reason, while my lungs were being filled with this gas. And then there appeared in the doorway my head of department, who told me very firmly to get out of the lab and through this door now. And I came to my senses, and that's what I did. It was only when I'd left the building and I saw my head of department on the green field outside the laboratory and the science centre that I felt I ought to thank him for saving my life. And his reply was, I was nowhere in the centre. I was in the common room with all the technicians and the science staff, and you missed a meeting, and you were the only one in the centre. Apparently, what Ray experienced is a well-documented and well-understood principle of psychology. It's a principle known as the third man syndrome. And there have been widespread instances where people have encountered what might be referred to as guardian angels. The explorer Shackleton, in his autobiography, which he published, describes the 36-hour route march that he and his 2 surviving colleagues made in pitch black, cracking ice, while suffering the pain and the agony of frostbite, cuts. He said it was dangerous, it was terrifying. But there's one key line in the account. He said there were 3 of us, but at some times there were 4. The third man syndrome, it comes apparently from a poem by T.S. Eliot called The Wasteland. And more modern examples, for instance, Ron DeFranco was on the 84th story of the World Trade Center when the aeroplanes went in. Suddenly he was thrust into blackness, smoke, and he was trying desperately to find his way out. And a voice behind him gave him clear directions. Turn right now, turn left, don't go down those stairs, go down these stairs. And eventually he made it to safety and turned round to thank the voice of the person behind him to discover that there wasn't one. That in fact he was the last person who survived and left the World Trade Center. Paul Sudfield, the psychologist, says that psychologists do accept this principle of the third man syndrome, but are often reluctant to ascribe to it the work of a god. Perhaps we might think differently, because if there's one thing that we know about God, it's that he delights in overturning our expectations and delights in surprising us. Thank God for that. Amen.